Now, here's one thing that we keep telling you on the show. When it comes to climate, the world has not put its money where its mouth is. And leading the climate hypocrisy is the West, specifically the United States. It is the biggest greenhouse emitter in history, ever. America has been burning coal and natural gas for decades now. It is responsible for 40% of excess carbon emission. But it has refused to pay its climate debt. Now, India has taken this up. India is demanding compensation for climate damages. Our story tonight begins in Germany. A meeting was recently held there. Officials from around the world met. They were preparing for the next UN climate conference. It was here that India called out the West and asked them to pay for climate damages, pay for problems that India is suffering but are of the West's making. The unbearable summer, for example. Every day is 42 degrees Celsius in this part of the world. Yes, it's summer, but it's not supposed to turn India into a furnace. Delhi summers are usually anywhere between 36 to 38 degrees, or they used to be. But this year, parts of the city recorded temperatures up to 49 degrees. On a good day, it's above 42 degrees. People are suffering, so are crops. Heat waves, floods, droughts, extreme weather conditions cost us a lot. Every year, India is suffering a loss of about $87 billion because of extreme weather, $87 billion. Cyclone Amphan, for example, displaced 2.4 million people in India. This was in 2020. In the state of West Bengal alone, 13.6 million people were affected. The current heat wave is affecting more than 1 billion people. Mango production has fallen by as much as 70% in some parts of the country. Who will foot the bill for all of this? Rather, who should foot the bill? A 2015 Lancet study found that the United States is responsible for 40% of excess global carbon dioxide emissions, meaning more than its fair share of emission. The European Union is responsible for 29% of excess CO2 emissions. The G8 nations are responsible for 85%. Industrialized nations are responsible for 90% of excess emissions, and the global north for 92%. What is the global north? It includes these countries: the United States, Canada, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and Israel. By contrast, the global south is responsible for just 8% of excess global carbon dioxide emissions, and India is well within its fair share of limits. So India has every right to ask the West to pay for the mess they created, to bear the responsibility for driving climate change. An Oxfam study found that the richest 10% of the world's population is responsible for around 50% of the global emissions. And by now you know where this 10% lives. In which part of the world? So where is the national responsibility? The West loves to lecture others, to tell others to cut down emissions. Maybe it's time they acted themselves by investing in climate action. Maybe it's time they went beyond the loud climate promises they've been making. The Obama administration, for example, had pledged $3 billion. This money was supposed to help countries that were hardest hit by climate change. $3 billion. Do you know how much they invested? Only $1 billion. Then came Donald Trump, the climate denier-in-chief. He tore up this plan. He walked out of the Paris deal. Joe Biden pledged to be different, but that promise is still awaiting financing. In 2009, rich countries had pledged to raise $100 billion a year by 2020. The money was supposed to help developing countries, those suffering because of climate change. So I want to ask tonight, where is that money? The US is contributing less than 20% of its share of climate finance, and India is demanding climate accountability. It is demanding climate financing. This money will be used to carry out reconstruction, to compensate for crop losses and the loss of home and livelihood. Should other countries follow suit? Should they too ask the West to pay for climate damages? I don't see why not. Every developing country that is suffering from extreme weather, that is suffering from droughts, floods, famines, storms, rise in sea levels, or climate deaths should ask Western nations to compensate. Because why should we be paying for a crisis that the West whipped up? WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.